The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle as Queen Camilla hurried through the private courtyard, her heels clicking against the ancient stones. She pulled her silk scarf tighter around her shoulders, trying to ward off both the early chill and the weight of her decision. Behind her, a footman struggled with two heavy suitcases, their brass corners catching the golden light. Camilla had spent sleepless nights planning this moment. The constant pressure, the endless scrutiny, and the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room had become unbearable. Even within the walls of the palace, she felt like an outsider looking in. The British public's acceptance had been slow and painful, and recent events had made her question whether she truly belonged in this world of ancient traditions and unforgiving protocols. Her phone buzzed with another message from her sister, who was waiting at a discreet location outside London. Everything was arranged. A quiet retreat to the countryside, away from cameras and critics, where she could think clearly about her future. The official story would be a brief holiday for health reasons. But Camilla knew in her heart this might be permanent. As she approached the side entrance where her private car waited, she noticed something unusual. Instead of the regular palace staff, there stood Marcus Wellington, the head of the Royal Protection Unit. His imposing figure blocked the doorway, and his expression was unreadable behind his dark sunglasses. Marcus had served the royal family for over 15 years, earning respect through his unwavering loyalty and sharp instincts. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, stepping forward with a slight bow. His voice carried an unusual tension that made Camilla pause mid-stride. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Camilla asked, attempting to keep her voice steady. "I specifically requested minimal security for this morning." The footman set down the suitcases beside them, sensing the awkward atmosphere. Marcus dismissed him with a subtle gesture, leaving the three of them alone in the courtyard. The silence stretched uncomfortably as palace ravens cawed overhead, their black shapes circling like omens. "I'm afraid I cannot allow you to leave." "Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly, his trained eye noting every detail of her appearance. From her traveling clothes to the determination in her posture, Camilla felt her heart race. How could he possibly know? She had been so careful with her arrangements, confiding only in her closest personal assistant. The weight of realization settled over her like a heavy blanket. Someone had betrayed her confidence. "I beg your pardon?" she replied, drawing herself up to her full height with the practiced dignity that years of royal training had instilled. "I am the Queen Consort of England. You do not have the authority to prevent me from leaving my own home." Marcus removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes filled with genuine concern rather than defiance. "Your Majesty, I have served this family through its darkest hours and its brightest triumphs. I have seen the damage that hasty decisions can cause, not just to individuals, but to the entire institution we're sworn to protect." The morning air seemed to thicken between them. Camilla glanced toward her waiting car, where her driver sat, obliviously reading a newspaper. Freedom felt so close, yet Marcus's presence made it seem impossibly far away. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," Camilla said, her voice beginning to crack despite her efforts to maintain composure. "Every day feels like a performance where I'm constantly being judged and found wanting." "I understand more than you might think, Your Majesty," Marcus replied gently. "I've watched you grow into this role, seen your dedication to the charitable causes you champion, witnessed the genuine care you show for the people you meet. The country may not always express it clearly, but they need leaders who truly care about their well-being." As they spoke, other members of the palace staff began to gather discreetly in nearby doorways and windows. Sensing that something significant was happening, the morning routine of the castle seemed to pause, as if the very stones were listening to this crucial conversation. Camilla looked down at her suitcases, symbols of her planned escape from a life that had never quite fit comfortably. Inside them were not just clothes and personal items, but the physical representation of her desire to return to a simpler existence, free from the constant scrutiny that had marked her years as a member of the royal family. "Sometimes I wonder if everyone would be better off without me here," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus took a step closer, his professional demeanor softening to reveal the man behind the uniform. "Your Majesty, if I may speak freely, running away has never solved anything for this family. The challenges you face are real, but there are also opportunities to show the world what true strength looks like." The conversation continued as morning turned toward noon, with Marcus carefully and respectfully challenging every reason Camilla gave for her departure. His years of experience had taught him that sometimes the most important part of protecting someone was protecting them from their own impulses during moments of desperation. The weight of tradition, duty, and personal fulfillment hung in the air between them, creating a tension that would define not just this moment, but potentially the future of the monarchy itself. As other members of the royal household began to take notice, it became clear that this was more than just a personal crisis. It was a defining moment that would ripple through the institution for years to come. The standoff in the courtyard had drawn the attention of Sarah Mitchell, Camilla's longtime private secretary, who appeared at the doorway with obvious concern etched across her face. She had worked with the queen consort for nearly a decade and had never seen her in such a state of distress. Sarah's arrival added another layer of complexity to the already tense situation. "Your Majesty," Sarah said softly, approaching with the careful steps of someone entering a minefield, "perhaps we could discuss this inside. The morning staff is beginning their rounds." Camilla shook her head firmly, her resolve hardening rather than weakening. "No, Sarah, I've made my decision. I need to leave, and I need to leave now." Marcus studied the dynamic between the two women, noting the genuine affection and concern in Sarah's expression. He had learned over the years that understanding the personal relationships within the royal household was crucial to maintaining security and stability. "Your Majesty," Marcus continued, "I've received word that several news outlets have photographers positioned outside the main gates. If you leave now, in this state of distress, the headlines will write themselves. Is that really how you want this story to unfold?" The mention of photographers made Camilla's shoulders sag slightly. She had lived long enough in the public eye to understand the devastating power of a single, unflattering photograph or misinterpreted moment. The British press had been particularly harsh in recent weeks, criticizing everything from her choice of charities to her fashion decisions. "They're going to write their stories regardless," Camilla replied bitterly. "At least if I leave, I won't have to read them." Sarah stepped closer, her voice taking on the tone of a trusted friend rather than an employee. "Ma'am, do you remember what you told me when you first took on the patron role for the Literacy Foundation? You said that sometimes the most important battles are won not by avoiding difficult situations, but by facing them with dignity and determination." The memory struck Camilla deeply. She had been so passionate about that cause, so determined to make a difference in the lives of children who struggled with reading. It had been one of the few times since becoming queen consort that she felt truly useful, truly needed. Marcus watched this exchange carefully, recognizing an opportunity to build on Sarah's words. "Your Majesty? Yesterday I received a letter from a woman in Manchester whose daughter learned to read through one of your literacy programs. She wanted to thank you personally for changing her child's life. That little girl doesn't care about negative headlines or palace politics. She only knows that you made her future brighter." Tears began to well in Camilla's eyes, though she fought to maintain her composure. "But what about all the criticism? The polls showing that half the country still doesn't accept me? How can I continue when I feel like I'm failing everyone?" "Ma'am," Sarah interjected gently, "do you remember the feedback from your visit to the cancer treatment center last month? The nurses said that several patients specifically asked when you would return. They didn't ask about any other member of the royal family. They asked about you." The weight of these reminders began to chip away at Camilla's resolve. She had focused so intensely on the negative voices that she had forgotten about the positive impact she was making. The constant barrage of criticism had overshadowed the genuine good work she was accomplishing. Marcus seized on this shift in her demeanor. "Your Majesty, I've served this institution through some of its most challenging periods. I was here during the difficulties of the 1990s, through the loss of Princess Diana, and during the various scandals that have tested the monarchy. What I've learned is that the royal family is strongest when its members stand together, especially during difficult times." A light breeze stirred the autumn leaves in the courtyard, carrying with it the scent of the royal gardens and the distant sounds of London, awakening to another day. Camilla looked around at the ancient walls that had housed centuries of monarchs, each of whom had faced their own crises and challenges. "But I'm not like them," Camilla said quietly. "I didn't grow up expecting this life. I don't have the natural grace that makes this look effortless." "That's exactly why you're needed," Marcus replied with conviction. "The people don't need another perfect royal who seems untouchable and distant. They need someone who understands struggle, who has faced criticism and doubt, and who continues to serve despite those challenges." Sarah nodded in agreement, pulling out her phone to show Camilla something. "Ma'am, I received this video message this morning from a support group for military wives. They wanted to thank you for your recent visit and tell you how much your openness about your own struggles meant to them." Sarah played the brief video, showing women who had benefited from Camilla's advocacy work, expressing genuine gratitude and affection. Something began to shift in the queen consort's expression. The wall she had built around her heart to protect herself from criticism began to crack, allowing in the warmth of appreciation she had been blocking out. Marcus watched this transformation carefully, knowing that this moment could determine not just Camilla's future, but potentially the direction of the monarchy itself. He had seen too many times how personal crises within the royal family could spiral into institutional crises that affected millions of people. The sound of approaching footsteps indicated that word of the situation was spreading through the palace staff. Soon, this private moment of crisis would become a public spectacle if it wasn't resolved quickly. The pressure of time added urgency to an already emotionally charged situation. Camilla looked down at her suitcases again, but this time with different eyes. Instead of seeing them as vessels of escape, she began to see them as symbols of giving up on all the people who depended on her, who looked to her for support and inspiration in their own struggles. The tension in the courtyard reached a breaking point when the sound of approaching footsteps echoed against the stone walls. Charles, Camilla's husband and the king, appeared at the entrance with an expression that mixed concern with determination. His arrival changed the entire dynamic of the confrontation, adding the weight of both personal and constitutional authority to the situation. "What's happening here?" Charles asked, though his tone suggested he already understood the gravity of the moment. His eyes moved between Marcus, Sarah, and finally settled on Camilla with a look of deep understanding. Marcus immediately straightened to attention. "Your Majesty, I was explaining to the Queen Consort that perhaps this isn't the most opportune moment for travel." Charles approached slowly, his years of experience in handling delicate family matters evident in his careful demeanor. He had learned through decades of public life that rushed decisions, made during emotional moments, often led to lasting consequences that extended far beyond the immediate participants. "My dear," Charles said softly to Camilla, "I had hoped we could discuss this together before you made any final decisions." Camilla's composure finally cracked, and tears began to flow freely down her cheeks. "Charles, I can't do this anymore. Every day, I feel like I'm disappointing someone, whether it's the public, the press, or even members of our own family. I wake up wondering what mistake I'll make today." The raw honesty of her words hung in the air like a confession that had been building for years. Charles moved closer, reaching out to take her hands in his, a gesture that spoke of decades of shared struggles and mutual support. "Do you remember what you told me during my darkest moments as Prince of Wales?" Charles asked gently. "You said that the measure of a person isn't how they handle success, but how they respond to adversity. You helped me find strength when I thought I had none left." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances, both recognizing that they were witnessing an intensely personal moment that would be crucial to resolving the crisis. The professional situation had evolved into something much more fundamental about duty, love, and personal resilience. "That was different," Camilla replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You were born to this role. The people have always accepted you as their future king, even when they criticized your choices. I'm still seen as an interloper by many." Charles shook his head firmly. "The path to acceptance is never easy for anyone who marries into this family. My mother faced criticism, Diana faced criticism, and now you're facing criticism. It's not about avoiding the storms, it's about weathering them with dignity." Marcus cleared his throat respectfully, drawing attention back to the practical concerns. Your Majesties, I should mention that the Prime Minister's office has been trying to reach you both. There's an important state dinner next week, and several international dignitaries have specifically requested to meet with the Queen Consort. This news surprised Camilla, who had assumed that most foreign officials were more interested in meeting with Charles. The realization that her presence was specifically valued by international leaders provided a new perspective on her role and importance. The French president's wife particularly wanted to discuss your work with literacy programs, Marcus continued. She hopes to implement similar initiatives in France and sees you as a leading expert on the subject. Sarah pulled out a folder she had been carrying. Ma'am, I brought these letters that arrived yesterday. They're from various organizations around the Commonwealth, all requesting your patronage or support. The number of requests has actually increased significantly in recent months. As Sarah handed over the letters, Camilla's hands trembled slightly. She had been so focused on the negative feedback that she had failed to notice the growing positive response to her work. The stack of requests represented genuine need and appreciation that went far beyond the political noise. Charles watched his wife carefully as she processed this new information. My dear, I think you've been listening too closely to the wrong voices. The critics will always be loudest, but they don't represent the full picture of your impact. One of the letters caught Camilla's attention. It was from a group of women's shelters across Britain, thanking her for her quiet but consistent support and asking if she would consider expanding her involvement. The letter described specific cases where her advocacy had helped secure funding for crucial programs. I didn't know my work was having this kind of impact, Camilla admitted, her voice softening as she read through more of the correspondence. Marcus seized on this moment of reflection. Your Majesty, in my years of protecting this family, I've learned that the most important work often happens away from the cameras and headlines. The people who benefit from your charitable work don't usually write to newspapers, but they do write letters like these. The autumn sun had climbed higher, casting shorter shadows across the courtyard and warming the space where this crucial conversation was taking place. The change in lighting seemed to mirror the gradual shift in Camilla's perspective as she began to see her situation from new angles. But what about the constant scrutiny? Camilla asked, still holding on to some of her doubts. How do I continue when every public appearance is dissected and criticized? Charles squeezed her hands gently. The same way every member of this family has done it, by focusing on the work rather than the commentary about the work. The critics fade away, but the lives you touch are changed forever. Sarah stepped forward with another document. Ma'am, this is the preliminary schedule for your upcoming engagements. Would you like me to cancel them all, or would you prefer to review them first? The question forced Camilla to confront the practical reality of her decision. Canceling her commitments wouldn't just affect her, it would disappoint countless people who were counting on her presence and support. As Camilla stood there, contemplating the weight of her scheduled commitments, Marcus made a decision that would become the most dramatic moment of the entire encounter. Without asking permission, he stepped forward and firmly grasped the handle of her largest suitcase, lifting it with both hands in a gesture that was both protective and symbolic. Your Majesty, Marcus said with quiet authority, I cannot allow you to carry this burden alone anymore. The unexpected action sent a shock through everyone present. Charles straightened in surprise. Sarah gasped audibly, and Camilla stared at Marcus with a mixture of indignation and confusion. The head of royal protection had just physically intervened in a way that went far beyond his usual duties. Marcus, what are you doing? Camilla demanded, though her voice carried more bewilderment than anger. I'm doing what I should have done weeks ago, Marcus replied, maintaining his grip on the suitcase while meeting her eyes directly. I'm refusing to let you walk away from everything you've built. Everyone who depends on you, and most importantly, from yourself. Charles watched this unprecedented scene unfold, recognizing that Marcus was taking an enormous personal and professional risk. Royal protection officers were trained to be invisible guardians, never to insert themselves directly into family decisions or personal crises. In 15 years of service to this family, Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger, I have never seen someone work harder to earn their place than you have. I have watched you transform from someone who was uncertain about her role into a woman who has quietly revolutionized how the monarchy connects with ordinary people." Sarah stepped closer, emboldened by Marcus's bold action. "Ma'am, he's right. Last month, when you visited that homeless shelter in Birmingham, the director told me it was the first time any member of the royal family had asked about their long-term funding challenges rather than just touring the facility." The suitcase in Marcus's hand seemed to grow heavier with symbolism. It represented not just Camilla's desire to escape, but also the weight of expectations, responsibilities, and the complex relationship between personal happiness and public duty that every royal must navigate. "You don't understand," Camilla protested, though with less conviction than before. "The criticism isn't just from the press anymore. I overheard conversations at the last state banquet. Even some government ministers question whether I'm the right person for this role." Marcus set the suitcase down, but positioned himself between it and Camilla, making his intentions clear. "Your Majesty, I've overheard many conversations over the years. I've also seen those same ministers specifically request your involvement in their charity events and policy discussions. People often say different things in public than they do in private." Charles moved to stand beside Marcus, creating a united front. "My dear, do you remember the conversation we had with the Archbishop last month? He specifically mentioned how your authentic approach to faith and service was inspiring a new generation of young people to engage with the Church." These revelations continued to chip away at Camilla's resolve, but she still felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of her responsibilities. "But what if I'm not strong enough? What if I continue to make mistakes that embarrass the institution?" "Then you'll handle them the same way you've handled every challenge so far," Marcus replied with surprising warmth. "With grace, humility, and determination to do better tomorrow than you did today." Sarah opened another folder, this one containing photographs from various royal engagements over the past year. "Ma'am, I want to show you something. These are candid photos from your public appearances, not the official ones. Look at the faces of the people you're meeting." As Camilla reluctantly looked through the photographs, she saw something she had missed in her focus on negative headlines. In image after image, she saw genuine smiles, tears of joy, and expressions of gratitude from people whose lives had been touched by her presence and advocacy. "This woman," Sarah said, pointing to one particular photo, wrote to thank you 6 months later. She said your conversation about overcoming personal struggles gave her the courage to leave an abusive relationship. The emotional impact of seeing these faces, of being reminded of these individual moments of connection, began to overwhelm Camilla's defenses. She had been so consumed by broad public opinion that she had forgotten about the specific lives she had affected. Marcus watched this internal struggle with the patience of someone who understood that lasting change required time and reflection, not force or manipulation. His years of protecting the royal family had taught him that sometimes the greatest threats came from within, from despair and self-doubt rather than external dangers. "Your Majesty," Marcus said gently, "I need you to understand something. When I took this suitcase, I wasn't just stopping you from leaving. I was trying to show you that you don't have to carry these burdens alone. None of us do." Charles stepped forward, placing his hand on the suitcase as well. "Marcus is right. We've let you struggle in isolation for too long. That changes today." The gesture was simple, but powerful. 3 people, each representing different aspects of royal life, personal, professional, and protective, standing together around the physical symbol of escape and abandonment. The moment crystallized everything that had been building throughout this emotional morning. Camilla looked around the courtyard, seeing it with new eyes. Instead of a prison from which she needed to escape, she began to see it as a platform from which she could continue to make a meaningful difference in the world. The ancient stones suddenly felt less like walls and more like foundations. "What happens now?" Camilla asked quietly, her voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and tentative hope. Marcus smiled for the first time that morning. "Now, Your Majesty, we go forward together." The dramatic moment when Marcus declared they would move forward together marked a turning point. But the practical reality of rebuilding Camilla's confidence and reshaping her role required immediate action. Sarah quickly took charge of the logistics, understanding that momentum needed to be maintained while emotions were still raw and honest. "Ma'am, if you're willing, I suggest we return to your private study and completely restructure how we approach your public engagements," Sarah proposed. "We need to create a support system that helps you see the positive impact of your work in real time." Charles nodded approvingly at Sarah's practical approach. "That's an excellent idea. We should also establish regular check-ins where we can discuss any concerns or difficulties before they become overwhelming." Marcus began walking toward the suitcase. But instead of picking it up, he turned to Camilla. "Your Majesty, would you like to carry this back yourself? Or would you prefer that I arrange for it to be returned to your quarters?" The question was loaded with symbolism. Carrying the suitcase back herself would represent taking control of her decision to stay, while allowing someone else to handle it might suggest that the crisis had been resolved for her rather than by her. Camilla considered the choice carefully, understanding its deeper meaning. "I'll carry it," she decided, her voice growing stronger. "But I'd appreciate your help with the heavier one." This division of responsibility felt right to everyone present. Camilla would take ownership of her choice while accepting support from her team, a balance that could serve as a model for her entire approach. It's two royal duties going forward. As they walked back toward the palace, Camilla began asking specific questions about her upcoming engagements. "Sarah, tell me more about the Literacy Foundation event next week. What exactly are they hoping to accomplish?" Sarah's face brightened as she explained the details. "They're launching a new program specifically designed for adult learners who missed educational opportunities earlier in life. They want you to speak about overcoming personal challenges and second chances." Irony wasn't lost on any of them that Camilla was being asked to speak about second chances at the very moment when she was giving herself one. The alignment between her personal experience and her public role suddenly seemed less like a burden and more like an asset. Marcus walked slightly ahead, his trained eyes scanning for any signs that their morning crisis might have attracted unwanted attention. "Your Majesty, I recommend that we establish a new communication protocol. Instead of you feeling isolated when facing criticism, we should have regular briefings about both positive and negative feedback, with context provided for each." Charles added his own suggestion. "Perhaps we should also arrange for you to meet with some of the people who have benefited directly from your charitable work. Sometimes written testimonials don't have the same impact as face-to-face conversations." As they entered the palace through a side entrance, several staff members glanced their way with obvious curiosity. Word had clearly spread that something significant had been happening in the courtyard. Though the exact details remained unclear to most of the household, "We should address the staff," Camilla realized. "They deserve to know that everything is stable and that there won't be any major changes to our operations." This consideration for the people who worked around her daily demonstrated the thoughtfulness that had been overshadowed by her recent struggles with public perception. Marcus made a mental note to ensure that this compassionate leadership style was highlighted more prominently in future public engagements. They paused in the grand hallway, surrounded by portraits of previous monarchs who had faced their own crises and challenges. Camilla looked up at one particular painting of Queen Mary, who had navigated the abdication crisis and World War with remarkable strength. "Do you think they ever wanted to run away?" Camilla asked, gesturing toward the portraits. Charles followed her gaze. "I'm certain they did. The difference is that they like you, chose to stay and find ways to serve despite their personal struggles." Sarah opened her tablet and began showing Camilla the messages that had been arriving throughout the morning. "Ma'am, your private secretary network has been quite active. Apparently, word got out somehow that you might be taking extended leave, and we've received several urgent requests for you to reconsider." The messages came from unexpected sources: heads of charities she had barely interacted with, international diplomats she had met only briefly, and community leaders from across the United Kingdom. Each message reinforced the same theme. Camilla's presence and advocacy were valued far more widely than she had realized. "This is overwhelming," Camilla admitted. Though her tone suggested she was beginning to see the overwhelming nature as positive rather than negative, Marcus checked his watch and realized that they had been managing this crisis for over 2 hours. "Your Majesty, I should mention that we'll need to develop a response for any media inquiries about this morning's activities." Several photographers noticed the unusual level of activity around the palace. Charles considered this carefully. Perhaps this is an opportunity for transparency rather than secrecy. We could acknowledge that Camilla has been facing challenges and that the family is working together to address them. The idea of being honest about struggle rather than maintaining a facade of perfection was revolutionary for the royal family. Camilla found herself intrigued by the possibility of using her vulnerability as a strength rather than hiding it as a weakness. What would that look like practically? Camilla asked. Sarah had already been thinking along similar lines. "We could arrange for a carefully planned interview where you discuss the pressures of royal life and how you found ways to cope and continue serving." It would be groundbreaking in its honesty. As they reached Camilla's private study, the morning's crisis was transforming into an opportunity for fundamental change in how the royal family engaged with both personal struggles and public service. The suitcase that had once represented escape was now sitting beside Camilla's desk as a reminder of the choice she had made to stay and fight. 3 months later, the same courtyard where Camilla had once planned. Her escape was buzzing with activity as preparations were made for a special ceremony. The queen consort stood at her study window, looking down at the space that had become symbolic of her personal transformation. The suitcase that had once held her hopes for escape now sat in her closet, serving as a daily reminder of the choice she had made to stay, evolve rather than run. Marcus approached the study door and knocked gently. "Your Majesty, the representatives from the Literacy Foundation have arrived, along with some special guests." Camilla turned from the window with a smile that had become more natural and confident over the past few months. The changes in her demeanor were obvious to everyone who worked closely with her. The constant tension and worry lines had softened, placed by a sense of purpose and belonging that had taken time to develop. "Special guests?" Camilla asked, though her tone suggested she suspected what Marcus might be referring to. "Some of the adult learners from the program you launched," Marcus replied with obvious pride. "They wanted to thank you personally and share their success stories." The literacy program for adult learners had become Camilla's flagship initiative. Born directly from her experience of overcoming personal challenges and finding strength through adversity, the program's success had exceeded all expectations. With waiting lists in cities across the United Kingdom and inquiries from other countries interested in implementing similar programs, Sarah entered the study carrying a folder thick with correspondence. "Ma'am, the latest batch of letters from program participants. Also, the Prime Minister's office has requested a meeting to discuss expanding the program internationally." The transformation in how Camilla was perceived, both within the palace and by the public, had been gradual but unmistakable. The honest interview she had given 2 months earlier, where she spoke openly about her struggles in the morning when she had almost left, resonated deeply with people across the country. Rather than seeing her vulnerability as weakness, the public had embraced her authenticity. Charles appeared in the doorway, his face beaming with pride. "My dear, are you ready for your presentation? The Archbishop has arrived, along with representatives from all the Commonwealth countries that have expressed interest in your literacy model." The ceremony taking place today was unlike any traditional royal event. Instead of focusing on ancient traditions or ceremonial duties, it was celebrating real, measurable change in people's lives. The adult learners who would be speaking had all overcome significant challenges to complete their education, inspired in part by Camilla's openness about her own struggles. "I still can't believe this all started from what felt like my lowest moment," Camilla reflected. Looking around at the team that had supported her transformation, Marcus stepped forward, his expression serious but warm. "Your Majesty, that morning in the courtyard taught all of us something important. Sometimes the most valuable thing a leader can do is admit when they're struggling and ask for help." Palace staff had noticed remarkable changes in how the royal household operated. Since that crisis morning, there was more open communication, more collaboration, and a greater sense of shared purpose. The crisis had forced everyone to examine their roles and find better ways to support each other. Sarah showed Camilla the latest polling data, which revealed a dramatic shift in public opinion. "Ma'am, your approval ratings have reached an all-time high." More importantly, the feedback specifically mentions appreciation for your honesty and relatability. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that Camilla's moment of wanting to flee had ultimately made her more effective in her role than ever before. By acknowledging her humanity, she had connected with people in ways that traditional royal distance never could have achieved as they prepared to leave for the ceremony. Camilla paused at her desk where a framed photo now sat, a picture from that morning 3 months ago, showing Marcus holding her suitcase while she, Charles, and Sarah stood around him. Someone had captured the moment from a palace window, and it had become a symbol of support and determination for the entire household. "Marcus," Camilla said, turning to face the man who had literally prevented her escape, "I never properly thanked you for what you did that morning." Marcus shook his head respectfully. "Your Majesty, I was simply doing my job, protecting what matters most to this institution and to the people it serves." "You protected more than just the institution," Camilla replied. "You protected me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Charles reached for Camilla's hand as they prepared to leave for the ceremony. "My dear, you've shown that true strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up and using what you learned to help others do the same." At the ceremony that followed was a celebration of second chances, personal growth, and the power of authentic leadership. Camilla spoke to the gathered crowd about her own journey, including the morning when she had almost given up, and how the support of her team had helped her find a new way forward. The adult learners shared their stories, many of them crediting Camilla's openness about struggle and growth as inspiration for their own educational journeys. The program had expanded to include not just basic literacy, but also digital skills, financial literacy, and personal development courses that addressed the whole person rather than just academic needs. One participant, Maria Santos, a single mother who had dropped out of school at 16, stood to address the crowd. "Your Majesty showed us that it's never too late to change your story. When I heard her speak about almost giving up, I realized that my own struggles didn't disqualify me from success, they prepared me for it." The applause that followed was genuine and heartfelt, representing a connection between the monarchy and the people that felt more authentic than any traditional royal event. Camilla found herself moved to tears, not from sadness or overwhelm as she had been months earlier, but from joy and a deep sense of purpose. As the ceremony concluded, Marcus approached Camilla one final time. "Your Majesty, there's something I want you to know. That morning when I stopped you from leaving, I was taking the biggest professional risk of my career. But I knew that letting you walk away would have been a far greater failure than any breach of protocol." Camilla smiled, understanding now the depth of courage it had taken for Marcus to intervene. "Marcus, your willingness to risk your career to save mine is something I'll never forget. You didn't just protect the institution that day, you helped create a better version of it." The sun was setting over Windsor Castle as the day's events wound down, casting the same golden light across the courtyard where Camilla's transformation had begun. The space that had once felt like a prison now felt like a launching pad for a meaningful work that extended far beyond the palace walls. Sarah approached, with the final surprise of the day, a letter from a young girl in Scotland who had learned to read through one of the family literacy programs that had grown out of Camilla's initiative. The letter was simple but profound. "Dear Queen Camilla, thank you for not giving up. Because you didn't give up, my mom learned to read, and now she can help me with my homework." As Camilla read those words, she understood fully why Marcus had been so determined to keep her from leaving that morning. The ripple effects of her work extended far beyond what she could see or measure, touching lives in ways that wouldn't be fully understood for years to come. Charles joined her as they walked back through the palace corridors, past the portraits of previous monarchs who had faced their own moments of doubt and decision. "My dear, you've created something remarkable here. You've shown that the monarchy can evolve and grow stronger by acknowledging human struggles rather than hiding from them. That evening, as Camilla prepared for bed, she opened the drawer where she kept the letters from program participants. The collection had grown to several thick folders, each one representing a life changed, a family strengthened, or a community improved. The suitcase in her closet remained as a reminder, but these letters had become symbols of why she had chosen to stay. The story that had begun with a desperate attempt to escape had transformed into a testament to the power of support, persistence, and the courage to be vulnerable in service of others. Marcus's dramatic intervention with the suitcase had lasted only moments, but its impact would be felt for generations through the lives touched by Camilla's renewed commitment to her role. As she turned off the light, Camilla reflected on the journey from despair to purpose that had defined the past months. The woman who had once felt like an outsider in the royal family had found her place not by conforming to expectations, but by bringing her authentic self to the role and using her struggles as a bridge to connect with others facing similar challenges. The suitcase remained in the closet, a permanent reminder that sometimes the most important journey is the one that brings you home to yourself.